Welcome to another episode of Dil Se Stories. We have once again a very special guest, Mr. Aditya Shirke. Namaskar.
Hi, Namaskar.
So, welcome. And please, let's start off with you introducing yourself to our audience.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Aditya Shirke. I'm a practicing artist based out of Pune. Uh, and I've done my graduation in fine art from Abhinav, which is kind of a famous school in Pune for art and architecture. I've also done two master's degrees in fine art again. One is from Maharashtra itself, and the other was from the UK. And I think I've been practicing for around um, 20, close to 20 years now. So professionally. Uh, Apart from that, well, I mean, it's been a nice journey being an artist. Uh, not a path that is well trodden or normally people would take. I was actually going to take up architecture, so it's kind of destiny or incidental that I walked up to the other floor and took up, quite literally actually. And I'm not being metaphorical when I say I took the other floor. The architecture college uh, department and the fine art department were on like floors, one on top of the other. So I'd gone in to take architecture and I went up and just enrolled myself for fine art. So yeah, that's about me in a nutshell.
Amazing. And I'm uh, Dr. Parag Bharadwaj. I'm a practicing doctor. You said you practice art. So, uh, thank you very much for your time. So, let's get going. You mentioned, let's start off with you making a choice between architecture and fine art. And,
Mhm.
do you remember that day you left home intending to submit your application to, become an architect? I mean, do you remember
Yeah.
that moment when you got there? What made you go an extra floor?
um, yeah. So, uh, in a sense, the decision to take up fine art was made a few months or a year before. To be honest, I just went through the motions of doing my 11th and 12th in science and kind of being open to apply for microbiology and for architecture. Did the architecture entrance, cleared that, and then but. Like I said, I use the word destiny, or it was fated. I met Mr. Pratap Moik, who was an illustrator for Amar Chitrakatha. So I mean, that really pushed me into thinking that this is what I have to do and this is what I would like to do. I was good in art, uh, fairly decent in art. I didn't really think much of it before that. But meeting him really made me kind of know in my heart that this is what I would want to do for the rest of my life. So that is where I kind of decided. So in my 12th standard, I was pretty much sure that I was going to take up fine art, but I didn't talk about it uh, in the house that I will definitely go there. The idea was that I'll do architecture and then I can always pursue art as a hobby. So also very uh, when around 18, you're really easily inspired by stuff you read, and it wasn't the age of the internet back then. So I was reading stuff, and I'd read Swami Vivekananda. So there's one quote that really hit me at that point, which is uh, I might not be verbatim, but it was something on the lines of making money for the sake of making money is the worst way to make a living. And as an 18-year-old, that kind of struck me, and like, right, so that is not why I should take up a profession. I should do it for some greater good or some passion that I want to follow. So, I mean, these two things kind of came together, and I decided that I'd take up fine art. So, but I'd filled the form up for architecture anyway. So when I went there, I filled the form up for fine art as well. I filled both forms up, and then kind of when the day came to take the admission. It was the day that really my parents, I told my parents that I'm going to do fine art. So kind of a mild shock for them, but uh, they were all right in the end.
Great. Glad it all worked out.
Yeah, yeah.
So, let's talk about your art. When did you notice, or when do you remember being influenced by art?
Influenced. I think I've always been a visual person. So I remember way back from when I was around 3 years old. So uh, I have been influenced by images, and it's stuck on. Uh, and I kind of found it meditative or relaxing, or time kind of slipping by when I used to draw. So it didn't. I wouldn't get bored as a child. Is what I remember. I could just a ball pen. I didn't have too many art materials growing up, so I used to use ball pens and you know sketch out or draw anything that could cut out photographs from the newspaper or a magazine, and then kind of try to draw those some sports people from the sports page and do that. So that is how I kind of went ahead with that. And I mean, I didn't particularly think I was very good, uh, but people around me used to say that I am, and I did get a couple of small awards in school. So, I mean, that kind of had me thinking that, yeah, I mean, probably I have something in there in terms of uh, drawing and painting at least.
Very nice. So, we will add the link to your Instagram account. It's fascinating. And one of the things that I noticed when I was going through it is that you
Mhm.
really, one of the things that you focus on is actually the human anatomy, right?
Yeah.
So what, I mean, because, like in medicine, you have different specialists. To me, that is sort of like what your main specialty is, right? You do other things as well, but that to
Sure.
me is
Sure.
what you focus on the most. So can you just describe in terms of why you got fascinated by the human body,
Mhm.
and you know tell us a little bit about something that somebody, a commoner like me, would not know.
Yeah. You're not a commoner by any stretch, but yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the figure or the human body, you're way ahead. Um, but yes, I mean, my specialization was portraiture back in graduation, and I was always uh, keenly aware that the figure is something that I want to pursue in art. Um, and this is especially important to point out because back in the early 2000s, the stage for fine art was more of a conceptual or an abstract kind of a landscape where figurative drawing was looked down upon or was considered almost dead. So that was an uphill task to kind of stick on with it and not say that you know okay, I had to kind of argue for the motion that the human figure is, I mean, timeless, and it doesn't really go out of fashion or anything like that. You just need to interpret it differently, maybe showcase it differently, or all of that. But yeah, I was pretty sure that I had to uh, continue with this idea of the figure being prominent in my works. Uh, so I took up portraiture as an elective, and I also did nudes and nude studies, and then that followed into a greater study of anatomy, which led me to study anatomy further in an advanced manner. We had a very cursory kind of an anatomy lesson in art college, but uh, I then went on and kind of took it up further because I am up to this moment quite fascinated by the human figure, and every day and every human form I see is simply. It amazes me even today. So that wonder has not gone. So I think, and I don't think it's going to vanish. So the figurative artist in me is still there. Having said that, I am also impacted or inspired by abstraction for what it does in terms of conveying the ideas of the sublime and the voids, you know, which is what all of us humans really deal with, as something that one has to deal with in terms of being, no matter how or where you're placed. Um, the void or the emptiness is something that one is born from and goes into and lives with, in some sense, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, but that is what everybody is grappling with. So I mean, the universe is one big void. so, so in that case, minimalistic abstraction is also kind of something that I like quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, in my uh, head, abstraction and the figurative are not in a big tussle. So they are answering, uh, parts of a question that I have. I hope
So
I haven't digressed.
no, it's great. So what I really was amazed, there is a reel you have, which is, it's 5 hours and 30 seconds.
Mhm.
Because
Right,
when you look at it, it looks pretty simple, right? But then I
right.
think
Yeah, yeah.
uh, I wouldn't have guessed it took 5 hours to make something like that, right? Because
Sure.
out of my
Yeah,
ignorance, right? So, and it's the
yeah.
way you break down, it's the way you break down the different body parts and then you bring it all together. It's just
Sure.
amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, no, no. Yeah.
So the question I have for you is there anything when you've drawn and you've painted figures from around the world, right? Is there something very unique to the Indian body type or anatomy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, every group kind of differs in some manner and shape. So, uh, and the Indian figure really has a grace of its own. Uh, so if you don't just use a standard Western lens to just look at everything, you realize that the proportions, Indian proportions, are kind of quite marvelous in themselves, and they're you have a set of Indian proportions as well, which are slightly tending towards a more stylized way of painting the figure. But nonetheless, it gives you a great idea of how uh, the Indians and the ancients, really saw the figure and terms of proportions that they thought were ideal and beautiful, which are slightly uh, different from the Western canon, which has a beauty of its own. That, but it is clearly different from the Indian canon for sure. I mean, it was, I think, the French, uh, the proportions that we use now as artists was done by Paul Richer in the early or the late 19th century, measuring around 100 Europeans, which is a fabulous work, and his canons really hold up. But in terms of Indian proportions, I mean, the height doesn't match what he would subscribe to as the average height. In an Indian sense, that would be a taller height. And also the ratios of the shoulder or the waist to the hip ratio, all of those things are fairly different, markedly different, in my observation at least. I've not done a proper statistical study like he has, but anecdotal or observationally, you can clearly demarcate those differences. And in that, I would say, I mean, uh, the hip to waist ratio within the Indian context is quite substantially different. from the European one.
Got it. So, tell us about, you know, the art scene right now that you deal with and around you.
Mhm.
Uh, who are your customers? How are things going? Because, I always wonder, the artist life is never easy.
It isn't. It isn't. Yeah.
So, how is your art received? Do you exhibit your art? Where all have you had your exhibitions?
Sure. So I always start out when people ask me what I do. The simplest thing I say is I paint and I sell paintings, which sounds fairly simple, but I guess selling paintings is equally hard. So that's a good question. So the art market right now probably is much better than what it has been uh, for several years. So people are more open to buying art, and there are more platforms, and it is easy to get your art through. So there's that democratization of platforms through social media and all of that. So there's a definite positive to that side, along with the obvious pitfalls of mediocrity that come with an highly open source model in any field. But I mean, you can't discount the positives because of that. So uh, in terms of the art market and clients, I've been kind of lucky to have a few clients who've kind of seen me grow right from my graduation days and have supported me in kind of collecting my work. And also, like I said, social media, I've tried to put out my work onto Instagram and stuff like that as I'm doing it. So sometimes, uh, there are people who catch on to it and like the work, and you know there are purchases made from there as well. So from quite serious collectors, I mean, one would imagine, because spamming and phishing, yeah, happens quite a bit, but there are some serious collectors also who just drop you a DM and uh, ask you about a particular work that has caught their eye. So recently, I do sculpture on and off when I've had too much of painting, kind of to wind down or to relax. I do sculpture. Uh, so recently, a few months ago, I was doing a sculpture and I was posting every stage as I was making that sculpture. So around halfway through that sculpture, somebody who's a collector, and he has a few works of mine previously, but he kind of just saw half the work and he was like, once it is done, I would like to collect it. So in that sense, one would say that yeah, there's a net positive to the art market right now. But it isn't easy, because I mean, just to state all the obvious things, for somebody who is not well versed, is art is not something. I mean, it is a need, but it is not an everyday need for people. So buying art is not on a priority for everybody. Uh, so you don't sell paintings on a daily or a monthly basis consistently. So like any business, you have a good month and a bad month. So you have to kind of mentally deal with that and be prepared for that and account for that in all aspects.
Got
Yeah.
it. And thanks for being so candid and sharing that. So yes, you mentioned painting, sculpture, and then you also take pictures.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I'd done a photography diploma in Ferguson College. So that's it's a quite nice college actually. It has a decent bit of history, around 200 years old. So lovely college. I'd done my diploma in photography over there. That was when we had film photography. So like dark room, and you have that red bulb, and there's a timer going off, all of that. So I do like photography. I think photography is an art in itself also, but I also kind of extend photography as references for probably paintings or something else moving forward. So in that sense, I use photography both as an end in itself or as a reference material for later on artworks.
Great. So, coming back to your particular artwork,
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed there was, you have a sketch of a dog. I'm sorry, two dogs, I think, right? And can you hear me?
The recent one.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then that's, it's amazing how the lines come together to
Mhm.
make a whole, right?
Right.
Which is
Yeah, yeah.
actually, which is fascinating because you actually show the process, right?
True, true, true. Yeah.
And then sometimes you have you capture splashes of color which are very nice, great contrast and so forth. So what makes you decide if this is going to be a black and white, or
Uh-huh.
is you're going to splash some colors, uh, or is it just impromptu, or do you make a picture of what you're going to uh, uh,
Uh,
what the final product is going to be first, and then you start off with your art?
you kind of have an idea of where you want to go without really knowing the exacts, but you have a fair idea of what you were set out to achieve in that particular artwork. So in terms of and then that kind of decides the colors and the technique to use. So in terms of the sketch that you're talking right now, that's kind of a preparatory sketch for a portrait I'm going to do of the dogs over there. So there are two dogs. I just did that preparatory sketch to get a hang of, because there are two poodles, and you know, uh, dogs look like dogs. You know, so when they're placed together and they're two different dogs, you want to make sure that you get the character correctly of each dog, so that they do look like two different dogs, not just the same dog in two different poses. If that makes sense, because it's very easy to make a dog very generic, or any animal for that sense. I mean, for portraiture of a people is easier because we have very distinct features, but like dogs and such, you can easily just make them very very generic. So that sketch was preparatory to just get a hang of all the key notes, as they were, of what the differences were in this face and the others. Uh, and then other more realized paintings, then I have to consider kind of color and what impact that color would make. Does it have any significance other than color harmonies or contrasts? Is it making some other statement? Does it have other significances, cultural significances? Is it a cultural marker? All of those. uh, of course, these are kind of thoughts that you kind of start stacking up. It's not as though you sit down and make notes of all of these and then start the artwork, because then that becomes too mechanical. But those are thoughts that do stack up as you progress with your work.
Great. So are there times when you start off with a particular image in your mind, but then when you start working on your painting, you're like, it ends up being
Yeah,
something very different?
yeah. That almost, I mean, happens almost always. So and I like that idea of kind of veering off slightly uh, from what one wanted to do, because that keeps the freshness and the spontaneity of it. Otherwise, if you know exactly what you want to do and then you just go doing exactly all of that, it's like painting by the numbers, no? As we had in children. So it takes away the thrill of the process, and the process is equally important for me. So I do have a basic idea of what I want to do, but then I allow myself to kind of veer off and actually make mistakes. So, which is what I've learned through the years, is not kind of be very harsh on not being accurate. Uh, my idea again in painting goes in terms of how one would kind of sculpt in clay. So you add stuff, you remove stuff. So you add more clay, then it becomes too much. Then you remove some, then you add again, then you shape it, push it in. So in painting also, I add a few strokes. They're wrong. They're too much. The nose becomes too large. They have to kind of add a shadow somewhere to make it smaller. But that entire process makes it much more alive than just a very clearly demarcated portrait, at least in my opinion.
If I were to guess, I would think that you're a perfectionist, right? No, I'll tell you why. Because there is a
Right.
very nice sketch using a pen that you've shared on Instagram,
Hmm.
and it's a female
Hmm.
figure. You've drawn the figure from the
Sure.
front, and then drawn the same figure from the back.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it is. I was I was thinking, this looks like two pictures, one taken from the front, one taken. It's an exact replica that you
right.
see from the front, that you see from the back. So I thought it was just fascinating when I saw that. Amazing
Thank you.
work. Uh,
Yes, I am kind of a perfectionist in a way. I try to kind of brush it off, but it does pop itself out. So that's why I allow myself to make mistakes. I'm very conscious that I should not be very rigid, and through the process, I'm kind of trying to be as loose as possible. Uh, so that is our kind of tread on that. But I mean, perfection, at least aspiring to perfection, is something which I think is a good thing to have, because then all of that splash and dash spontaneity is going to just be chaotic. So I think you need the aspiration of perfection with the spontaneity. Otherwise, it's going to just be very chaotic.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, you've uh, got that correctly. That I am kind of a perfectionist, and I do get peeved when certain things are not, you know, uh, just the right way that they should be. They may be very subtle things. So, like for the normal person, one might not really know that it is a mistake, or it's not even a mistake, but it's a certain thing that I want a certain way, which hasn't happened. So yeah, I can beat myself over that.
What is fascinating about this conversation is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things that you're saying is actually they match the personalities of doctors, right? Uh,
That's right.
and so and then you're looking at things from an artist point of view. I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you what I mean by that is, I have some friends who are doctors and who are very relaxed, but when it comes to certain things, they are very picky, right?
Right. Right.
So, say for example, I mean, that's what you would want, right? If you're a surgeon, you want to make sure everything is done very
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
methodically and so forth. So you seem, if you were to be a doctor, I would think you would have been a surgeon.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about, do you have any dream project?
Hmm. Yes, I do. I mean, there was this theme I've been working on. So, um, I'm not particularly religious, but there are certain aspects, and my art really kind of feeds through what I want to say or narrate. In that sense, there's this idea of the duality and incoherence that I've been trying to grapple with and work with. So, and that is what I want to do in my artworks as well. So, I started it out in 2012. So, I think it's more than 10 years now. Uh, so, the grains of it was started back then of how I want to kind of do a series on this idea of incoherence uh, and duality. So, I've been trying to kind of uh, distill it into a body of works that would be a good show to put up, which I haven't been able to because I've been doing other small projects and all of that. And I've done a few shows between that, obviously. But I mean, that because it is such an important thing to me, because it is something that I want to say on a very personal level through the works. Um, it's taking me quite a while. Hopefully, 2025, I should be ready with with a show that kind of has those things that I want to say. Apart from that, I the last 11 months was a very interesting time because I worked on a project uh, for a museum which has a few artworks, one of the largest artworks being around 93 feet across and 23 feet uh, in height. So that's quite massive. And I don't know the end result yet because it's been all painted on the iPad. So there were about 150 figures in it and a historical scene, all of that. So it was a technical challenge and a creative challenge because it had to be like my paintings. It couldn't be like a digital illustration. It was actually digital painting, and it had to be detailed, and it had to kind of have a resolution size which would scale up to that size of 93 feet and 23 feet. So there were some technical challenges for that. uh, so it should kind of open soon enough, I think next month or so. So I'll find out how the final result looks up on the wall, because it's quite a uh, project that's been under the wraps for a while. So once it's done, I'll know.
Yeah, and we'd love to see it.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
Um, we are going to be running out of time, but I will tell you,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
a testament to your work, right? That somebody actually wanted to buy your work even before they saw what the end result would be. So
Right.
it's a fascinating,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, story. The other thing is, before we wind up, I always
Mm-hmm.
wonder, right? So how do artists look at the world? I think artists look at the world so differently. So when things that people like me we just ignore and pass by, artists are able to capture so well. I mean, there's this painting that you have of a steel cup with a reflection. I'm assuming that's you. It looks like
Right,
you.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, just very, very
Mm.
fine, moments that we just take for granted and we ignore. And I always wonder, like, is your mind always racing, like, and looking at everything as an opportunity to create art
Right.
out of?
Yeah, actually, that does happen. So, I mean, that's a very interesting notion to play with. And I mean, now that you put it, I've never thought of me thinking differently from other people. I assume, I mean, like everybody else, one assumes that everybody thinks like we do, and classic biases. Uh, but yeah, one does realize that not everybody does. And as an artist, um, like you said, everything presents itself as an opportunity. As a visual artist, especially, everything around is a shape and a form. Whether it's a piece of rock or a beautiful figure in front of you, it's all opportunity to paint or draw or sculpt. Uh, so in that sense, yes, I guess we are always on, and there are times when I consciously say that I'm just going to not look at anything as possibilities. I'm just going to. So the artwork that you're talking about is a self-portrait on a steel kettle or a glass, if I remember. And that was done during we drove from Maharashtra into coastal Karnataka, and we were in a resort, and in the morning we were having tea, and it was there in front of me. And that trip, I decided not to take a sketchbook with me, not to take a ball pen or a pen or anything with me, so that I will not kind of start sketching or scribbling. So, but I did have my iPad with me. So then in the morning, having my tea, I did that artwork. So one thing I'd like to add about this is, I think it helps, being an artist, it helps to be more easily in tune with the present moment. What generally people talk about as present moment awareness, or being in the present. That happens slightly easier, or comes more easier to artists than most normal people, because we are so keenly aware about the surroundings and what's happening, and shapes, objects, light, sounds. all of that kind of naturally plays into being present in the moment rather than kind of racing forward or backward. So I mean that's an opportunity if it is to kind of be present. Yeah.
Very well put. Such a nice conversation that we've had with you, and look forward to seeing more of your works. Uh,
Sure.
and so, wish you the very best.
Thank you
And
so.
if you don't mind, we'd love to have you once that painting is launched. We'd love to talk
Sure,
about
sure, sure. I'll do that once I have a glimpse, and I'll definitely try to. Oh, here's my dog.
it. What's his name or her name?
His name is Khandu. It's a
Very
very
nice.
Marathi name.
All right. Well, I think he needs your attention and we'll get out of your way. Thank you very much for your time. Have
Thank
a
you so much for having me. Thanks a lot.
thank you.
I know you have a busy schedule ahead, so you took out the time. That's really nice of you.
Very, very thankful for your time.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.